I belong to you.
Do just what you want. You're the one I trust, and I always be around when I need some loving, baby. No one else.
Yeah.
Let you down.
Let you down. Playing all my melodies.
Take me to your heart.
I belong to you.
Take me to your soul. No one else. Let you down.
Playing all my melodies.
Good morning. Podcasts are everywhere. Podcasts are the new buzzword. Podcasts are the new trend. It's everybody and their mama, as we used to say back in the day, wants a podcast. Everybody has an idea of what a podcast is. But I'm here to tell you right now, today we are going to be talking about 5 reasons why you should start a podcast, but also give you a little bit of history about what a podcast was and kind of what it is right now. So you got to stay tuned. Make sure you stay tuned so as we talk about the 5 reasons for starting a podcast. Be right back. All right. Oh, got the wrong angle, but it's okay. Here we go. There we go. I'm gonna put it on over there. There we go. Awesome. It's not even the wrong angle. I got this. Good morning. Um, you know what? As I was thinking about this topic today, I realized that I'm not even sure that I've ever provided, my perspective on why people should start a podcast. As long as I've been doing it, I've been interviewed, I don't know how many times, but I don't think I've ever actually said anything or given anybody any perspective about what a podcast is and why, literally, of like why you should start a podcast. So that's what we're going to do today. If you're new here, I'm Steve Worthy. I am coach and, of course, host of Podcasters Live, where our goal is to help authors and leaders increase their platform and their discoverability, utilizing the powerful combination of podcasting and live streaming. So today, we are here to talk a little bit about what a podcast is and 5 reasons of why you should actually start a podcast. But before we go ahead and do that, I want to say hello to make sure we say hello to a few people that are in the audience. Oh, we should have got the comments going on. There we go. Hey, how you doing? How you doing, Sandy? Sandy says she is all ears. We can do this because we are live. I'm gonna make sure we get this increased. Sandra is she's here. She says she's all ears. And what is going on, man? What's going on? Good morning, sir. Letting it get on. Let's go. I'm loaded for bear, man. I'm loaded for bear today. I really am. I got my stream deck. Working. I got that joint going on, and it's actually looking lovely. I'm gonna even like give myself a little bit of applause, and of course the air horn, which is actually pretty dope. I'm feeling good about myself this morning because you can see I changed up the music a little bit as well. So what? Let's do this. We are going to talk about the 5 reasons of why to start a podcast. But here's the first thing that we need to understand. We need to understand really what a podcast is. And who am I? Who am I to talk about this? Who's Steve Worthy to talk about what a podcast is? All right, so here we go. I'm gonna go back old school a little bit. Oh, and here's the thing. I'm gonna show you just a little bit. So this is me, back in the day, doing my first podcast, 2007. As Sherry Jones says, she has the receipts to prove how long she's been in the game for her personal branding. This is me right here, kind of giving you a little bit of my receipts of how long I've been doing this. And I'm going to show you this. So this is Steve. It's called By Husbands for Husbands. This is when I was married, and we would help husbands balance their entrepreneurial pursuits and being a husband. Amazing show, amazing niche that we actually had. It was when I first lived here in Atlanta. Jerry and I actually worked together briefly, and then we actually worked at our church. We were doing classes on how to actually start a business, and then we started doing and having conversations, and we realized that there was a market for us to actually help husbands balance that life. And here's the reason why is because we were trying to do it ourselves. So one of the first lessons, if you will, I didn't say this was going to be a lessons, but one of the first lessons that you should learn or should have or understand about a podcast is that you're helping solve a problem. And typically you're either solving a problem that you have already solved yourself or that you're in the journey of actually solving. So that's gym number one right there. But here we go. This is oh man, where is it? Where did it go? Okay. No, okay, I'm sorry. So that was one episode. This is actually just, you can see how long ago. I think it says 15 years. This is 15 years. This is Jerry and I going through and creating. This is just some of the episodes. I found this and I was like, okay, I gotta make sure I archive this so that way people can have a really good understanding of, one, how long we've been doing this, and also the passion in which I actually teach and connect around podcasting. So if you have any questions, first and foremost, make sure that you put that in to the not so much in the comments. If you have a question, I want to make sure that I answer them today, because I know you're gonna have some questions today. Because if you don't have any questions, I feel sorry for you, because this is gonna be an opportunity time for you to learn and grow as much as you possibly can around podcasting. So Wow, look at that young pod. No, right? I know. I was a baby face, man. I was such a baby face. That was a while ago. What's going on, Zed? How are you doing? Good to have you here. You're um, up here to suck it all in. Good. I hope you have your coffee. I do, so I'm gonna take a little sip and make sure that I am oops, that I got my coffee and I'm good to go. I'm gonna make sure I get through all these as well. There's a receipt. You got it. You got it, right? My man Ward. It's cool that the site is still there. I know, right? That's the power of podcasting for real. 100%. Yeah, 15 years. I'm a podcast OG. I appreciate that. I've been doing it for a while. Been doing this for a while, man. All right. So here's the first concern that I have. Oh, question. I'm gonna make sure I star that Walter, and we'll talk about that here in a second too. I like that. So that's actually a really good question too, and we'll make sure we talk about that one as well. All right. So we did this to buy husbands for husbands, yada yada yada. Talked about that. So here's the one thing that I want to. I always like to start with a foundation and then build it up from there. First and foremost. So one of the first things that I want to make sure that people understand is this concept of actually what a podcast is. So because there are two camps, if you will. There's the camp that talks about this staple definition here. I'm just going to read it. Podcast is a digital audio form you can download or listen to over the internet via RSS feed. RSS feed is a web feed that allows users and applications to access updates to websites in a standardized computer readable format. All right, that's a lot. When Jerry and I when we started podcasting, we utilized initially this platform, and it's called Blog Talk Radio. And when we started this concept, we just started it under the auspices that we wanted to help somebody do something. Period. Right? We were less concerned about maybe the delivery method of said conversation or said problem solving discussions that we were actually having. It wasn't until a CEO friend of ours told us about um, RSS feed and podcasting and the actual word podcasting that we said, oh, okay. So we turned all of our previous episodes and then every episode going forward actually into an RSS feed for downloadable consumption via the internet. And then we started marketing it that way. Apple was one of the only places back there. And then also just a really, a raw RSS feed where we would send out, because we started a mailing list back then. If you haven't started a mailing list, make sure you start that. We started a mailing list way back then, and we would send that out so people can actually go and download it and actually listen to it. Period. That was, and then of course RSS feed and podcasting as the years went on, we started to realize that this was actually something, and the word podcasting started to grow and grow and grow. Nowadays, everything's a podcast. If you utilize this definition right here, then everything that people talk about nowadays is far from a podcast. Okay? Please understand that. Everything that everybody says nowadays, and they say, "Oh my gosh, I just heard this podcast on YouTube." It's really not a podcast if you go by this foundational perspective, right? What they're really saying is like, dude, I just heard this conversation from somebody interviewing somebody else, or I just heard a monologue and somebody presented something to me, and boom, that's in my mind eyes is an actual podcast. So one of the things that we look at is a completely different perspective on what a podcast is. Podcast is a produced conversation. It's I stole that. I don't care. It's mine now. Share. I still got to give her credit, but she always says it's just yours now. But yeah, but she's the one that gave it to me on one of our live streams, and I'm owning it. And I'm keeping it right now. It's a produced conversation. It for us from a podcaster's live standpoint, and I'm going to tell you this right now. Going forward, I give it 12 to 18 months. We got something else we're going to talk about here in a second. Is that this whole idea around what a podcast is? It is changing, but the RSS feed is, you can hold on to that type of mentality if you want, but honestly, it is a produced conversation. And here's the thing: this last part, it's more about the content and method, less about less about the delivery method of the content. So once again, when Jerry and I were doing this, we were more concerned about the content. We were more concerned about the dialogue that we were having, and that we were and the audience that we were trying to serve, right? We use Blog Talk Radio. We sent recordings to people. Gosh, let me see. I mean, we gave them files. What else did we do? I mean, we went as far as actually having little thumb drives, right? That we had the little logo on, and we actually gave it to people, so that they can listen to it on their computer. So it was almost an RSS feed, if you will, right? People can listen to whenever they wanted to. We loaded different episodes on there, and we gave them out. So that was our distribution method of our conversation until the RSS feed came. Then we started to utilize that, right? So, but now, if you ask somebody what a podcast is, they will never, and I will say, excuse me, I had to use the word never, they won't even use the word RSS feed. I'm just talking about a regular person on the street talking about podcasting. They will never, excuse me, once again, I keep saying I'm going to never use a word. They will not use, for all intents and purposes, the word RSS feed when they actually define what a podcast is. So here's the one thing I wanted to do too. So we talked a little bit about that, right? I'm going to go, let me do this real quick. I'm going to answer Walter's question real quick because it's kind of relevant to what we're talking about right now. So let me do this. Actually, let me do this, Walt. So Walt says, question: would you ever go back? You ever bring that show back? A lot of us have a lot of great ideas for a podcast, but some of them shouldn't exist. LOL. What's your criteria for bringing that show back? I would, right? Get married again, right? I would bring that show back, because I think we knew it was relevant back then, right? We knew the idea of creating that podcast. We knew that there was an audience because we had so many guys, whether it was at our church or leadership conferences. And the other thing that I did a lot too was, back then, I was helping a lot of people. I was helping a lot of guys. How many of you remember business plans, right? How many of you remember business plans? I was helping a lot of guys write their business plans and their marketing strategies and different things like that. And so the majority of them were married, and so it was almost, I had almost like an incubator of an audience, and then it dovetailed into Jerry and I having this conversation about what it is that we wanted to do and the audience that we wanted to serve. And I think it's still relevant. Walt, I think it's still something that actually needs to kind of be out here, and something that needs to actually take place as well too. So Walt, okay, that's a good. That's the same question too. All right. So here's what I wanted to do. Real quick. I think I got this set up right. I want to make sure because I have a few windows open. But this is I wanted to do this real quick. I wanted to bring in some of these stats. around podcasting, and then we're going to get into it because I know that this is relevant to the audience that's out here too. Podcast listeners, this is just in the United States because I'm not gonna. I can get it. I can have another episode about podcast growth and how you should not have your podcast going abroad. But this is really what I want to talk about real quick here too. So, podcast listeners in the United States, 79% are familiar with the podcast. 62% say that they've ever listened to a podcast. 26% listen to a podcast every week. So there is an audience. There are people out there that are actually listening to said podcasts, whatever that definition may be. Here's the one thing that we want to talk about, and we want to make sure that people understand and get this before we get into the 5 reasons why you should start a podcast. And I say this all the time. There are 2 different thought processes when you start to think about your download, or excuse me, when you start to think about your podcast. It is around this idea around downloads versus consumption. Those of you who have listened to me for however long know that I am not anti-download, I'm pro-consumption, right? And now the market is taking notice. They have started focusing in on less downloads and more about what they call listener time or consumption. So here's the thing about downloads, and please understand this before we move forward, because um, when you think about starting a podcast or you currently have a podcast, you are going to have to adjust your perspective around how you produce that said conversation. Are you producing it for the download? Because here's what a download is. I'm going to read it right out here to you. It's an indication of the listener's intent to listen to the podcast. Dude, come on, man. Here, right, look at that. It's right there. It's right there. It's an indication of the listener's intent to listen to. That doesn't mean that they actually listen to it. Downloads are mad elusive. They are. And I get it. I get why why the industry has focused on it for so long, and because it was like, oh my gosh, it was almost equated the fact that if you downloaded that you will listen to it. I have I don't know how many downloaded episodes of Pod News, 20,000 Hertz, Business Wars on my phone, in my app, that I have yet to listen to. I have the intention of listening to them, but I have yet to listen to them. Let me just move this over real quick while I'm here and talking. I hope this is all making sense. Put write in the comments if this is making sense. Say, Steve, just put right, making sense. I'm tracking with you. One of the two. I just want to make sure that I'm not just speaking to myself here. Even if I am, I feel I'm okay. I've been podcasting for a long time, so I'm used to speaking to myself. I'm all right with this. All right. So consumption. Here we are. It measures how much of your episode listeners are actually listening to. All right. You want to start a podcast, you got a concept, you're thinking this is great. You've kind of figured out a little bit of a niche or a focus in what you want to, which the audience that you want to go after, the problem that you may want to solve. Cool. All of that stuff, right? But how much of that are people listening to? Right? We just talked about a download. It's the intent of listening. Consumption is they've actually listened to it, and this is how long they listen to it. All right. So and I should have put this one up here too. So when I stopped by husbands, 4 husbands, it took me about 4 or 5 years to and that's a That's a I'm just gonna put that one on. That's a great one, Share. Download is aspirational knowledge acquisition, aka. I like that. Oh, I like that. I like that one. I'm gonna use. I'm stealing that one too. That's all. That's a dope one. But there was a 4 5 year hiatus between me stopping that podcast and actually uh starting up a new one. And I started up a new one, and it was called The Worthy Podcast. I can get into naming and all of that stuff, all down the line. It was a horrible name for a podcast. Um, and what I was doing was I was just talking about um leadership concepts and stuff like that, coaching, da 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 da. And then I really got really super duper back serious and focused in on my podcast, and we changed the name to Retail Leadership with Steve Worthy, yada yada yada. Right, so that's where we are right now. And then I realized was that download numbers were good, right? They've actually been amazingly much better now, um, which is cool. But the one thing I started looking at about 2 years ago, when Apple Connect came out, was consumption. And that is the percentage of podcasts that people are actually listening to. So just because you put something out there doesn't mean people are necessarily going to listen to it. And then when you put it out there, how much of it are they actually listening to? So if your content isn't great, right? You may have to figure that thing out. That's why then people say content is king in this content creation space, right? So one of the things that I noticed was that when I first started back podcasting, I thought I was Joe Rogan. I was doing an hour and a half podcast. Dude, nobody knew me. Nobody, even my mom stopped, when she was alive, my mom stopped listening to after 6 episodes. She was like, baby, that's not my audience. I mean, I'm not your audience. Good stuff, but so even your people will give up after a time if the content isn't resonating with them. But what I realized was that people were falling off at around the 20 to 30 minute mark, right? Overall. And I was like, okay, something's not right. And I realized my content was I was talking too much. I was giving away too much. I switched my concept idea. I switched how I presented the information, and then I switched the amount of time I was actually providing my for my podcast episodes. My consumption went from 35% to 40% to over 75. Now it's actually in the 80s, from a consumption standpoint, meaning people are actually listening to more of my podcast. And man, if you are putting this stuff out there, isn't that what you want? Right? You don't want to just put this stuff out there, nobody's listening to it. You don't want what share calls the aspirational knowledge acquisition. You don't want that. Like, yeah, I'll get to that. I'll get to that when I get the time, right? You want the acquired knowledge. You want the acquired knowledge. Uh-oh. Series wants to jump in on there. Um Sandra has a quick question. Steve, does consumption mean it is a live stream or pre-recorded or both? Um, Good question. Good question. So I am really talking about. So if we start to talk about consumption, I am really referring to the idea of an audio podcast first and foremost, right? That is, they have the better tools, if you will, to um to gauge what that consumption or listen time is, if you think about it from an audio standpoint. But great question around live streaming. Live streaming, here's the one thing that is of course a little bit different. When you live stream, you can see, typically, whatever platform that you may be using, you can often see the number of people who are actually attending your live. You can see the number, if it's up to 25 or something like that. That's kind of cool, right? A lot of times, some of these platforms like Restream, they will actually give you information after you have a live stream, and it'll let you know how long people actually stayed on. It'll let you know how long people actually listened. It'll give you the peaks and valleys of your actual live stream. So there's information out there that you can actually use to gather your consumption or your listening time, right? Here's the one thing about live streaming too. As much as I love and I appreciate all of you who are engaging in the comments, and I'm going to make sure I put all the comments up here as well. There are people who are listening to this right now that aren't saying anything, right? And I'm okay with that. I'm good. I'm good with that silence. That means because they're listening. They're acquiring this knowledge, and they may be thinking about like, okay, well, how does this apply to me, or how can I make this apply to this project that I'm thinking about? And I'm cool with that. I mean, there are people that have listened to my even listened to my audio podcast for years. And now this year they just now saying something to me. Dude, I've listened to your podcast for the last 2 years. And like, dude, like, wow. Right. So there are people still listening. The goal is to just do it and get out there and produce the content that you want your audience to have and that you want them to listen to as well, too. All right. All righty. Let's make the stream deck fell asleep. That's how it always goes. So that was Sandra's question, which is good. I appreciate that. And thank you. So yes, yes, yes. Awesome. She's tracking with me. This is very practical and good. I will catch you on the replay. Thanks, Walt. I appreciate you being here, buddy. I think Walt, before you go, I think you had a question too. And Walt actually had a question. What's the best podcast hosting service to use for a new beginner? New beginner podcasting out of the gate. Okay. I gotta take a sip of my coffee. I don't have any alcohol in here. It's too early. But I need a sip of coffee to answer this question because I'm about to go down on a tangent for a second. Um, great question, man. Great question. Um, I'm just gonna tell you this, just how it is, man. This is just because that's just me. I'm not a fan of Anchor. I know some people are pro Anchor, especially since Spotify has acquired them. Yada yada yada. Here's the thing that I looked for when I started back podcasting from a hosting standpoint. I actually looked for a company that actually had a podcast themselves. And I'm not saying Anchor doesn't or anything like that. I think they probably do. But and here's the thing. I actually started out on Anchor up until I gained more knowledge and I realized that that wasn't the platform for me. So I have tried it. So um, I do have an affiliate link for like 2 or 3 different podcast platforms. Let me just say that up front. So that way it's not like me trying to sell you anything or me like, oh my gosh, this is sponsored by, it's not. Um, Captivate.fm and Buzzsprout for me are 2 of the better ones. There are, gosh, there are there there's there's a whole bunch. There's at least 10 to maybe 15 that are really good. But the reason I use Buzzsprout is because of the knowledge and analytics that they give. And I want to say 75% of the people who are actually running um, Buzzsprout actually have a podcast, and they are deeply rooted into the industry of podcast. They are not at the surface level of podcasting, right? Um, was speaking with somebody the other day about helping them with their concept from a retail standpoint. And one of the things that I would talk to them about all the time is like, you need to be the one actually creating the conversation and then not allowing the conversation to happen. And then you become like this also ran, or you just kind of put your 2 cents into the conversation. I think if you are going to be an expert or an authority, there has to be some measure of you establishing and creating the actual conversation. And that's what Buzzsprout does for me. They actually create the conversation around podcasting. They actually create some of the industry standards and tags and locations. They do an amazing job of helping you understand um, what to do from a podcasting standpoint and what a host should actually do for you. So just wanted to answer that question. All right. Cool beans, man. So let's do this. All right. Yeah, man. You guys got me going on the tangents, man, with all of this stuff too. Um, I still got a little time. Man, this is that man. Time is going by so fast. So fast. All right. So let's do number one. I know I wanted to get some of the foundational stuff out of the way so that way, and I know you guys will have some answers. And hopefully I've been able to do that. I could have and I can do a whole nother hour on what a podcast is and all of that stuff too, and even the hosting companies. But I wanted to get into this to these reasons and rationale. So number one, connection, connection, right? If you have something that you want to say to your audience, or if you want to connect to someone, to your audience on a deeper level, just talking to someone yesterday, um what you know him, the CEO of is it Remco, Remco, and he and I were talking about his new platform from live streaming and different things like that. And one of the things that he started talking about was this word of intimacy, creating this connection with people on his platform. I completely wholeheartedly agreed with him on that. And one of the major things that podcasting does for you, it creates a connection with you and your audience. Podcast creates a sense of connection between the host and the audience by sharing your thoughts or my thoughts, experiences, and expertise. You can foster community and engage with like-minded individuals. 100%. When you start a podcast, you are thinking about it in the context of the audience that you can serve. You're thinking about it in the context of the problem that you can solve. But the connection that you make with your audience is like none other out there. Even with live streaming, even this live streaming thing that I love to do, right? There is nothing like the audio aspect of connecting with it. If Corey Gums was on here, he would he's the founder of Black Podcast Association. He would go into the whole science of listening to podcasts and also listening how the brain works and how the brain actually makes a connection between your voice and authority, and then there's a sense of comfort that people receive over time with hearing your voice. And I just firmly believe that. Here's the other thing about podcasting and connection is because about eight, and I wish I should have put the statistics up here. There's about 86% of people who actually listen to a podcast by themselves. You just do, right? I actually think it's higher than that, but that's what the stats say. They say it's 86% that the people typically listen to a podcast by themselves, and then I guess the other one is typically like whether it's in the car, on a trip, or you guys are you know um, looking at it on YouTube or whatever, right? So it's maybe a cluster of people together for the remaining 14%. So just think about that. 86% of people are listening to you in their ear talk about whatever topic it is that you're talking about. And hopefully that topic is something that they're resonating with, right? So this is why the whole consumption piece, so please understand, that's why I started with that foundation, right? This is why I started with the foundation of understanding what a podcast is, talking about downloads, and then talking about consumption, right? Because when you start to talk about connection, the idea around whatever it is that you are purporting to people out there is needs to connect with them, and the more connection with them, guess what? The longer they're gonna freaking listen, right? I'm gonna get into monetization here in a second, right? So understanding I've never met a podcaster who actually never wanted their stuff to be heard. Right? I have yet to find them. If they're out there, come see me, and we can figure something out. I've yet to find somebody out there that has started a podcast and they were like, I just want to do it. Now starting out, you can do that, right? Because you just want to get a feel for what the platform is, and you want to get a feel for your voice. Understand that I did that. But once you get past that hurdle of trying to move forward, then guess what? You want people to hear what you got to say. You do. If you don't, like I said, come see me. We can help. I can help you with that and get you past that hump as well. I hope this is resonating with you guys. Um, if it's resonating with you, all right, right connection in the comments, right connection, or I'm connected, Steve. I like that one better. I'm connected, and then we're gonna move on to the second reason for this too. All right, influence and authority. I had the I had the pleasure and the good fortune of having Omar El Takori El Takori El Takori on my show. And if you don't know who Omar is, he helps with tons and tons of videos with Think Media. Um, he does tons of videos around cameras, studio setups, lighting, all of that stuff. Like he's a serious like OG, and he's only probably when I say OG, he's probably just been doing it for like 2 or 3, 4 years with that, but he has such a vast experience of it. And we started talking about all the things that he's done previously leading up to him moving on and doing his own company now. The video department was how he served in the background for his church and also for Sean Cannell of Think Media before he actually got his opportunity to move up. But what we started to talk about was this idea of authority. This idea of actually when you um, when you are consistent in your messaging, when you are consistent in what you are putting out there to the masses, over time you gain authority, you gain influence, right? Um, I didn't know how much influence I had in this area of my other podcast, Retail Leadership with Steve Worthy, until hearing some of the people talk about my episodes in their own terms. It was just like, oh snap, like ooh, when you shared this about this, you shared this about that. Da, da, da. Listen to me. I know that all my years of retail experience um, is of value. I know that hands down. I know that, but it's different when you are putting the content out there and then how it's landing with different people. You never know how it's going to land. You never know where it's going to meet them at. Too. Here's the other thing. I'm going to give you this for free. I'm going to give you this for free. Y'all better write this down. Y'all better write this down. Okay, because this is going to help some people. This is going to help some people. I'm going to get another sip of coffee. This is going to help some people. All right. All right. And this is going to help some people. Here's the thing about your podcast. What it should do. I got this stuff on my screen. I got to get this off. Here's the one thing about your podcast. Your podcast has a shelf life, and it has a limited time for certain people in your audience, and it should meet them where they are and help them move forward. Your podcast should be geared to move people through something, right? It should be okay for them to listen to your podcast for 2 or 3 seasons or whatever it may be, and then maybe move through something because you've helped them through this. Great example is my Retail Leadership with Steve Worthy podcast. I help single and multi-unit leaders, probably up to senior vice president, with the concepts of leadership that I present from a retail standpoint, and I help them and I move them through their career journey until they become a executive vice president or CEO. Then my content isn't probably a value to them. It's a value to them to go to utilize and to push back down to their teams. But at that point, I have helped people move through something in their life. And now they're at a point where they just don't need me no more. And I'm okay with that. I'm 100% okay with that. You got to be okay with that. Your content is not for everybody all the time. It is for somebody that's going to find your content when they need it, and they're going to be like, "Oh snap, Sandra, woo, this girl, this is exactly what I needed to hear when I needed to hear it, and you helped me through da 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 da, or you helped me solve X, Y, and Z problem. Boom, awesome. Guess what they're gonna do? They're gonna talk to their girlfriend or a guy friend and be like, "Yo, dude, I was going through the same thing, but I listened to Sandra's podcast, and she helped me through." Boom, right? So understanding that your podcast has a shelf life, and you have to be okay with that because your podcast is to help move people through. And by doing that, you garner influence. You garner influence and you garner authority, right? The other reason why you garner authority and influence with your podcast is because everybody and their mama either wants to do it or they're trying to do it, right? There's a lot of people out there, tons of people, and that's okay. That we talk to that I'm thinking about doing it. You guys make it look so easy. You guys sound so good. Da 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 da. Get it. But when you do it, you already and immediately garner authority and influence because there's a lot of people out there that really want to do it. So let's do this real quick. So influence podcasts can help you establish yourself as an expert or thought leader in a specific field by sharing your knowledge, insights, and influence the way people think, learn, and perceive your topic. I love the think and learn aspect of what I wrote down there because here's the other thing that this will help somebody else out too. Well, Steve, somebody's already doing my podcast. No, they're not. No, they're not. They're not. They're not doing your podcast. They're doing a version of a topic of your podcast, but they're not doing Sandra's podcast. They're not doing Cher's podcast, right? You know, they're not doing what's going on, Jonathan. How are you doing, man? Good to see you, buddy. They're not doing Jonathan's podcast, right? Jonathan's podcast and what he does is completely different than what I may be doing, right? Or Zed. So Zed's who's still connected, right here, right? What Zed is doing may be similar, but it's not the same. Why? Because everybody that's in the comments, you're completely different. And how you present a problem is completely different than how somebody else is going to present the problem, or how you experience the problem, right? Is completely different how that other person experiences. So guess what? The way that you communicate is going to be different. There is no competition. There is no competition, right? I'm telling you this right now. Just get it out your head. There is no competition but yourself. You are only competing against yourself in podcasting. Period. You are only competing against yourself. And if you start to think that, oh my gosh, I can't start it because my girlfriend just started a podcast that's similar, guess what? But her life experience is completely different than yours. 100% completely different than yours. So we can't get into the mindset that what it is that I have to say is any less relevant than what Jack and Jill has to say, right? My experiences are completely different, right? When we start talking about retail leadership, I am presenting the behind the scenes content stuff that you're not going to get in the manual. And I think that's why they really like my content. God bless you. Thank you, Lord. I appreciate that, right? Is that they resonate with the fact that I'm teaching them stuff that they're not going to get in the manual, right? They're not going to get these cultural nuances of my experience and how I've been able to kind of navigate through it. They're not going to get that, right? By listening to some of these people talk about the retail industry, right? That's cool, but how does the retail industry? How does that retail leaders impact the retail industry? And so my job is to focus in on those individuals who are actually creating the conversation, who are actually executing. All right, apologize, little diatribe, little rabbit hole there. All right, because I could have gone somewhere else with that too. So I appreciate that. All right, cool. So what's going on, Felicia? How you doing? Says indeed, I appreciate that. I appreciate that. And that's a gem. Ooh, thank you, thank you. I can actually increase this a little bit. There we go. Make sure that goes up there. And Sandra said, right, exactly. I appreciate that. I appreciate that. All right, here we go. So number three, creativity. Creativity. People, a lot of people feel like when you have a podcast, you can't be creative and you can't. You actually have to just kind of stick to a script and just say kind of the standard stuff that you want to say. Here's and once again, this is going to help some man. I'm trying to tell you right now. We're about to launch this podcast course, and I'm giving, and of course we do one-on-one coaching and group coaching. So some of the stuff I'm giving you guys that I put into these sessions. Oh, this is going to help somebody, right? A podcast is yours. A podcast is yours. You don't need CBS, NBC, Netflix, HBO, HBO Max, Apple TV. You don't need anybody telling you what to do with your podcast, period. A podcast is yours. A live stream is yours, right? Now, I'm not saying you can say whatever you want to say. I'm not saying you can do that. But what I'm saying is it is 100% yours. The you are the creative director, you are the director, you are the executive producer, you are the talent, you are all of them, all of them, right? You are the one that are actually greenlighting your show, right? Netflix is the greenlighting your show. You're the one greenlighting your show. You're like, okay, this is gonna be dope, right? This is gonna be dope, and and you start to. I haven't used this one, so I'm gonna use this one now. And you haven't um you don't have to worry about that. You don't have to worry about someone else greenlighting your idea, your thoughts. You can actually just do it yourself. And so from a creativity standpoint, a podcast gives you the license to be as creative as you want, right? You can structure it how you want. You can bring in whatever you want. You can layer in music, you can layer in sound effects, you can do whatever it is that you want to do too. And here's the other part of this too. Podcasting offers a platform to express your creativity through storytelling, interviews, or soundscapes. I'll talk about soundscapes here in a second. It's an excellent medium for exploring different formats and styles, giving you the freedom to experiment and innovate. It, when I realized my podcast, when I realized my um, when I realized, actually, let's go back to this one. When I realized my podcast consumption was super low, I had to create something different, and I had to innovate, and I did something completely different than what I started out with. My first podcast, retail leadership episodes, are completely different than what I do now, and I felt the freedom and I felt the freedom to do that because it's mine, right? It's not anybody else's. And here's okay. Here's a funny story. Funny story. Mad funny story. So I was thinking about changing from Lead Worthy podcast to Retail Leadership with podcast. Retail Leadership with Steve Worthy, and I remember this conversation that I had with myself, and I was like, "Oh my gosh, oh, I can't. I got. I don't know if the audience is ready for me to change it. This is a big deal for me to like go from Worthy, to this." And I was just talking to myself, and then I was on a walk, and I think it had to be God. And I was talking to myself. I was really like upset, like thinking about this thing, man. And God was like, "Yo, nobody know you. Who are you? You're not that big. You think somebody cares about your name change? Like you are not Oprah. Nobody cares. And I was like, he's right. Nobody cares. Like we get so, even though it's ours, right? It's our podcast, and we get so heavily invested in this podcast that we think the slightest change is going to upset the equilibrium of the freaking universe. That somebody is not going to sleep and go be able to go to sleep because we changed up the structure of our episode. Oh, can't do that. And so it was just so funny to me that I thought that highly of a podcast that really didn't have a core concept initially, that then I was moving to a really good core concept. And I was like, yo, I was like, dude, nobody knows you like that, man. Who do you think you are? And it just humbled me. And I realized, and I've been preaching this ever since, is that come on, man, you think you are not above your content, right? You can change your content, you can change the structure. This is what the creativity aspect of having a podcast allows you to do. I have I have talked to and worked with, I mean, gosh, dozens of people who have scrapped an entire podcast idea. Just completely scrapped it and was just like, dude, I'm done with this one and I'm just going to try something completely different. And then they found it and it was just like, okay, awesome, right? So you have the ability and freedom to actually do that, as well, right? This is right. I greenlight my own show. Can be a verse and as versatile and creative as I choose. 100%. 100%. All right. 4. Here we go. I don't know. I thought I had it set up the right way, but like I said, education. Education. Podcasts are an effective way to teach and learn about various subjects. As a host, you can educate your audience by sharing valuable information, inviting experts to discuss topics, and even learning alongside your listeners. I cannot begin to tell you how that last part, learning alongside your listeners, is important. So the educational side of a podcast does just that. Just it says what it does on the tin. That's my British folks say, right? It is the intent is to produce conversation in order to learn, in order to educate, in order to provide information, right? And so you should present it in that context, is that you are teaching somebody. I'm not saying at all concepts of a podcast should be that way. I'm not saying that at all, because there are just some podcasts that are just like super entertaining, right? I just want to talk about cars and gear. Or I just want to talk about, pop culture, songs in the '80s, all this stuff, right? It doesn't necessarily always have to be educational, right? But if you are thinking about this in a business sense, or you're thinking about your overall structure and intent and purpose behind behind your podcast, I think over time it does turn into some measure of education. And then the education alongside your audience. Here's why I say that is because your podcast, you need to have some research behind your podcast episodes. Did I just? I hope I mean, right? I'm gonna do an air horn on that one, just so that y'all listening, right? You need to have some research behind your podcast episodes. I have, oh man, I don't even know how many podcasts I've listened to. I have literally no clue. I listen to a ton of podcasts, and it always I'm gonna use my mom's old word, irk. It always irks me when and I don't care. This is not it's not nowhere near elitist. It just always irks me. It just does. This is my podcast and my live stream, so I can say whatever I want to say. It always irks me when I talk to somebody about starting a podcast. One of the first questions I ask them, what's your favorite podcast? Oh, I don't know. I don't really listen to a podcast. Dude, that is like to me talking to a chef. and them not having a perspective like, hey, what's your favorite knife, or like, what's your favorite meal, or what's a meal that you or a chef that you like, right? And they don't have. I'm not saying that that they a chef actually has to have this person. Oh my gosh, I love so and so, but typically they do. If you ask any chef, my nephew's an executive chef here in Atlanta, right? Um, but when people say they don't listen to a podcast and they want to start a podcast, it's just for me it's just like it's almost a non-starter because you have to embrace and immerse yourself into the culture of a podcast in order to do it. You have to educate yourself first and foremost about what a podcast is and how to deliver the content, so that way you can continue to learn alongside your listeners when you're presenting something. Here's the one thing they love it. Your audience love is like, dude, I just learned this today, and I want to present this out here to you, and I want to get your perspective on it. Man, you got them, because now it's disarming in a positive way, because you're like, dude, I'm learning this just as much as you are, right? And so the educational side of your podcast needs to be consistent, and you need to make sure that you are learning alongside your audience. And one of the best ways, second best ways to do that is to actually have a guest on your show. I am not advocating that every show should actually have an interview segment, but I think from time to time you should. I really do, even if you're a solo podcast, because there's a period of time people are gonna start. They're gonna tired of listening to just you, right? Or if you are creating a podcast in such a way where you are bringing in clips of an interview, and then you are probably expounding upon the structure, the context of that interview. Pretty, that's a dope idea. We utilize that with Podcasters Live, right? Our podcast for that. But when you have somebody else on your show, dude, you need to be as curious as you possibly can. You need to have that person on your show, um, so that your audience and you can learn something that you haven't learned before, right? I get upset when I'm listening to like a podcast and they got a dope um um guest on, man, and they just asking me softball questions of like, how did you get started? That's good. I get that. I get that. Dude, a better question is, dude, what was your first challenge and how did you overcome that challenge? Right? Or what's something that this is an interview question for me to tell. What keeps you up at night? Right? Ooh, right? So just think about it. Education is not just for you, but it's not just for your audience, but it's also for you as well. All right. All right. Let me see. Now, okay, I did that number 4. Last one. Last one. Woo, thank you. Let me know if you're tracking with me. If you're tracking with me, let me know. Um, this is the last one. If you're tracking with me, write in the comments, money, money, money. I'm dating myself, right? I wish I had the little song here. I actually could play that song or the little snippet of it. Money, 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 money. Um, Go ahead and put it in the comments. Let me know that you're tracking with me, alongside me, because I want to make sure that you are getting value, from this, and that we are providing you with some really good information. Like I said, we give this stuff out for our clients, and then the course that we are going to be launching. Um, I'm actually excited about talking about this because I haven't, like I said before, I haven't really given you the rationale behind starting a podcast, probably since I've been doing a podcast. I've talked about it on the shows, but I don't think I've ever really sat down. It's just talk to the audience about it, right? So I'm wanting to do that today. Monetization, 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 money, money, money. All right, let me make sure. Let me get this. We got uh Zed's Zed's tracking. Zed's tracking. I appreciate that. I'm going to put that down right there. All right, I'm gonna put that right there in the middle, right in front of me. Good. All right. Sandra's tracking. Awesome. Awesome. My man Walter is tracking with me. Cool. That's lots of value. Great stuff. I appreciate that. I really appreciate that so much. More than you know. More than you know. 100%. Great value. Excellent. Thank you so much. And then and Felicia. Awesome. Everybody is tracking and they are with me on this journey. All right. So you got a concept, you got an idea. I'm gonna utilize the journey of a of a client for us. You come to me, Steve, I got this idea. We walk you through how to have an audience. Um, we help you with kind of your concept development. We help you with your content calendar. We help you with the structure of your actual podcast episodes. One of the other things that we do is that we walk you through um, the idea and the concepts and actually of how to create an entire season of a podcast. Now, here's why we do it that way is because after 7 episodes, typically is what we call pod fade. Typically, some of the podcasters bail on their episode and bail on their concept. It wasn't because, like Sandra was talking about, greenlighting her own episode. It wasn't because somebody didn't greenlight that episode. It's just because they bailed on it. They probably had mismanaged expectations, and so we've worked with people who have actually had pod fade and want to start back up because we helped them kind of manage their expectations a lot differently this time compared to what they were doing initially. So you've created an entire season, 12 episodes, right? You've recorded, you've structured them, you've uploaded them into Buzzsprout or whatever it was, da 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 da. That season is done. And you're like, okay, dude, for all intents and purposes, your content has resonated with people. And I want to monetize this stuff, Steve. I want to figure out how to make money, from my podcast. This is one of the most not even controversial. Not even controversial. Um, it is one of the most probably searched and probably discussed aspects of podcasting. So with a successful podcast, you can generate income through advertising, sponsorship, or selling products and services. Podcasts can be a viable source of revenue once you've built a loyal audience. The last part, that part, once you've built a loyal audience, how many of you out there are thinking about monetizing your podcast, or you you're saying, okay, you want to see if I hear all of what you're saying, and now I think I'm at a point where I do want to monetize, or I haven't really given it that much thought, and I just want to know where you are, and because that will help me kind of gear this last portion of this conversation as well too. And then my man Walt, my guy Walt says, been there, bailed and back, bailed and back. Good. Well, yeah, man. I'm glad you. I'm glad you're back. I'm glad you're back. I'm glad you're back. Monetization. Um, there are so many different ways now that you can monetize your podcast, right? So if I go back to that earlier slide or earlier scene around downloads versus, let's do that, around downloads versus consumption. The number one initial way that podcasters were, and I'm going to put live streamer, or I'll just put podcasters initially, audio podcasters first, was there, is that people were paying based on the number of downloads that you were getting for your podcast, and they still do it to this day. They still do it to this day. It's still one of the best measures of actually getting sponsorship. If and typically the number is around and I mean really good. I mean like a notable sponsor. It's typically 5 to 10,000 episodes, the downloads per month for your episodes. Um, James Critlin, who I've had on the show twice, he does Pod News. I highly recommend that you subscribe to Pod News. It is a daily podcast that runs about 4 or 5 minutes, and it just gives you all the industry information that you get. That podcast on a monthly basis gets 150,000 downloads, not 150, not 100, not 1,500, 150,000 downloads per month. but James has been doing it longer than I have. But more importantly, James found a super duper niche around podcasting news and delivering it in a very consumable fashion where people will download it 4 or 5 minutes. That's not a lot to ask. So when you start to think about your podcast and this monetization piece, this is why I talk about the idea around consumption and versus downloads. Even though while downloads are still super popular, consumption is starting to take hold. And here's why. I am an advertiser. I have a product widgets and I want to sell to Walter. And Walter gets probably, let's say Walter gets, 3,000 downloads for his episodes, per month, which is a great number, but it's not 5,000, it's not 10,000, right? What Walter can go and say, what, I may not have 10,000, episodes, but here's what I do have. My listeners listen to 80, 90% of my episodes. That means that they trust me. That means that I am an authority. That means that I am educating. You see where I'm going here? How I'm building on all of this stuff? That means that I am an influencer, right? That means that I am creative enough in order for people to actually want to hear what I have to say and listen to 80 to 90% of my podcast. I may not have 5,000, 10,000 people, but I do have 3,000 people that listen to 80% of my podcast. As an advertiser, I would be like, okay, so that means if I ran 2 spots in Walter's episodes, that there is a it's highly likely that they are going to listen and hear those spots because they aren't falling off after 10 minutes. They're listening to more. They trust Walter, and statistics show that host-read ads or ads, there is a higher percentage. I want to say it's about 60% of people trust a product or service presented by a podcaster, and they will, not all of them, but there is a higher percentage of that 60% that will actually take action on that because they trust Walter. So the monetization piece comes into play, I think, initially when you actually have really good content, first and foremost, right? And people are willing to listen to your content for a decent period of time. Now, having said that, there are other multiple ways of monetizing that 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 we can talk about, right? Selling products and services. One of the first ways I monetized retail leadership with Steve Worthy was coaching. Was coaching. I was able to um, establish authority, be creative with my show, educate, and then turn that all of those pillars, if you will, into some form of monetization. That was my monetization, right? One client when I first started covered my entire year of podcasting, my hosting. Um, it covered gear. It covered one just one client, right, from my podcast. So just think about it in that context of how you actually want to monetize sponsorships, right? The other one of the other things too, and this is just food for thought. As I had once again had James Krillin on, we were talking about monetization and we were talking about different podcast concepts, and we were talking about the localization of a podcast. So if you have a podcast that is really highly localized, right? So my guy, if he was on there, Corey, I'm getting on Corey Gomes. I keep getting on him to start one for Queens, right? Like start a podcast specifically for Queens, the borough of Queens, right? Restaurants, what's going on, da 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 da, right? When guess what he can do now? But I have a podcast that's strictly dedicated to Queens, New York, pizza or whatever, Queens, New York restaurants or Queens, New York lifestyle or whatever it is. Now I can go into a lot of these restaurants or whatever and say, hey, do you want to advertise on my show? because my show is dedicated to just Queens. We're not talking about Brooklyn, we're not talking about Staten Island, we're talking about Queens, right? So take that same concept, an idea, if you were a premise, and take it and utilize it for your podcast. Is there somebody locally? Is there a niche um company that is highly um specific? Hopefully next week it pans out. um we are talking to ZipRecruiter for retail leadership with Steve Worthy. Guess what? Because we talk about retail leaders who are on their journey, in their career journey, and part of that sometimes is them actually leaving where they currently are, looking for another job. So ZipRecruiter is a nice fit for us to actually have as a sponsor. So think about it in that context from a monetization, but it starts with your content. It starts with your content and the audience that you want to serve. If you people, only way that you can think about monetization very at the very beginning is if you um if you come with a massive audience, right? I listen to and look at a whole bunch of different YouTubers, and they're videographers or photographers, yada yada yada. And then they'll make a video on BlizzDecks or something like that. I'm just using that as a super irrelevant example. But they'll make a video on BlizzDecks, and they'll still get tons of views. But guess what? They've built up the cachet to do that, right? They already had 1 million subscribers, 2 million subscribers. For them to make a video like, I just feel like making a video on BlizzSticks today. Guess what? People are still going to listen to them because they've been able to build up the authority to do that. When you're just starting out, you don't have that cachet. So you have to build up to that cachet. And it's okay. It's not a problem with doing that. Some people may disagree with me. Some people may say, well, no, I've been able to monetize. And you can monetize right out the gate, but you're taking some of those examples that I just gave you, right? Or you found somebody to give you some money to help sponsor your podcast for a couple of different episodes or whatever it may be. There are super duper other ways for you to do that. But in my experience, from a longevity standpoint and sustainability, those are certain thoughts and ideas that I have seen work and that we have helped coach with other people as well too. All right. So we got a couple of Sandra has a couple things. She said, yes, it's long term. So monetization for her is long term. So that's what she's thinking about. Excellent. Excellent. Okay. Wow. Thank you all. Yes, indeed. This is true. Coaching is something I actually offer without a podcast, right? Oh, so we gotta get you a podcast. We gotta get you a podcast. So you won't even blow up anymore. The concept I'm thinking is spiritual solutions to everyday life, right? Uh, spiritual solutions to everyday life. I mean, when you start to think about how people think about solutions, a lot of times we think outside of ourselves, or we think about maybe somebody else helping us provide a solution, or we start to think about what we've done in the past. And for those of us who believes, right, going to God, or just thinking about, or whatever that spiritual solution that you want to utilize, maybe that's how you focus in on it. There's so many different solutions out there, but have you tried this first? Right? See, I'm giving you some stuff already. We need to connect. Um uh yes, they have a following. Yep, and that's okay. Cool. Thank you. Appreciate that. So make sure you guys are tracking with me if you got some value out of this, for everything that we've discussed. um I have gone longer, and I knew I was, because this was a topic that is near and dear to my heart. And sometimes I especially it's Saturday morning, it's like 11 o'clock, 11:30, right? You still got the rest of your day to yourself. You still can do whatever it is that you want to do. That's why I started at 10 o'clock, because I still got stuff I want to do. I still got podcast episodes I got to record. I still got some videos I want to record here in the studio. I got to tell you, this podcasting thing, I'll go back to this real quick. When Jerry and I started this, um we had no clue, one, of what we were doing, right? I did a little bit of radio in college in New York. Jerry's from New York too. and we met in Atlanta. Um, we had no clue what we were doing. We were just two dudes that were business savvy enough to realize that there was a gap in the market, and we saw guys that needed something, and we were like, dude, let's help them. Let's 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 help them together while we learn. And we just produced conversations. And I remember one of our first we had our pastor on an episode, and we had a whole bunch of different, as you can see the list, we had a whole bunch of different people from a guest standpoint educating us, right? So number 4, right, was education, educating us as along with our audience around how to balance, right? So when you start to think about your concept, it's okay if it's not fully fleshed out, right? Right, because it's going to iterate over time. And it should. Why? Because you are going to grow over time. You're going to continue to educate yourself on this subject. So guess what? You are speaking from a higher perspective and a higher knowledge base than you were previously when you started, and so that's okay, right? And if and I have listened to tons of podcasts, and the ones that don't change or adapt and educate themselves and grow and create and add creativity, they don't last. They don't last. People don't want to hear that. They don't want to hear the same da 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 da. Right? Even I was just about to record a podcast yesterday, and I forgot what happened. Oh, the washing machine was going, so I couldn't record it. It's like right there next to the little studio that I recorded, and even when I was going to start that podcast episode, I was like, I'm going to start this one different, right? Um, Someone shared with me and how someone else started a podcast, and I was like, I was gonna start the podcast with giving them like one of the solutions to the problem that I was going to talk about. I rarely do that. I always kind of start with like a story, like, and the story is of course just super relevant to what we're going to talk about. But I was like, oh, I'm gonna start with like, it's like I was literally gonna say this, like, hey, I know don't usually do this, but I'm gonna give you like one solution to the problem right now that we're gonna be talking about. And I was gonna give it to him, and I'm still gonna do it that way. Right. But that that for me felt awkward doing it that way because I don't necessarily do it that way. But that's once again, this is my podcast. I can do it differently. You can do it differently. And even though it may feel awkward, I knew that actually that was going to resonate with somebody because they could be like, oh, yeah, Steve changing it up a little bit. Changing it up. Like, oh, wow. Right. And so everything that I've spoken to you about today, if you are thinking about, starting the podcast, actually, I should have put it on here too. Um, well, I'll put it back on this one. You can connect with us, at podcasterslive.com, right? The goal for us is to help you understand more about who you are so that way when you record or you get on video, you are coming across as your authentic self. That is the one thing that the underpinning of people who are, I feel, more successful than others is because they have an understanding of who they are, and they're not putting on a facade, and they're able to come across. But here's the thing, because this mic, as expensive as this mic is, right? As much as I love this mic will find you out, right? This camera will find you out. They will let you know, I can say it, if you suck or not, or if you are not yourself. I have done live streams when I kind of wasn't myself, and man, they were horrible. I literally had people texting me, dude, that just wasn't you, right? Or Walter in the podcast, Walter who's in the comments. I remember a quick story. I remember I was doing an episode. I recorded a podcast episode, and I needed to get it out, so I kind of scripted the podcast, and so I was kind of reading the podcast, and I was on a walk that day, and Walter called me, and he was like, "Yo, listen to your podcast, whatever the episode." I was like, yeah, yeah, yeah. I was like, yeah, what? He's like, dude, yeah, it sucked. And I was like, what? And I knew in my heart of hearts that it did suck. That episode did suck. I actually I re-recorded the whole thing, but I wasn't myself. I was trying to do something that was outside of who Steve was, and it didn't come out. It didn't come off. So that was a mad, crazy lesson for me to learn, is that I have to be authentic. I have to make sure that whatever it is that I'm putting out there is a measure, it's a byproduct of who I am. Your podcast, your live stream, it is nothing but a byproduct of who you are. If it's not, guess what? People aren't going to listen to it. They're gonna know straight off the bat that, dude, that doesn't sound like Sandra. I know Sandra. I know Sandra. That don't sound like her. Who she thinks she is? She can't be Oprah. Why is she on this trying to be? She says, yes, Sandra. I agree. Be authentic. Yes. And then Felicia, thank you. Thank you. I appreciate that. And you can't. Um, we we all learn on this leadership journey. You got that right. Oh, I mean, I can share stories for days. All right, I need to end this live stream. This is a live stream. This isn't a actual podcast episode. I will be actually utilizing this content for an audio podcast, but I'm not going to utilize this because I wanted this to be a live stream where I am continuously engaging with you. And to be honest with you, when you are consistently, engaging with the audience, it doesn't make for a really good audio podcast. That's a whole nother episode that I can talk about there too as well. Um, Thank you. If you got value from this, I really appreciate that. If you're looking at this on LinkedIn, make sure that you connect with me on LinkedIn. If you're looking at this on YouTube, whatever, on the replay, make sure that you subscribe and hit that alarm button as well. And then we have an amazing Facebook group, with Podcasters Live, where we do a lot of great stuff and talk about a lot of great content in there. And then once again, if you're looking at utilizing the powerful combination of a podcast and live streaming, you want some one-on-one coaching, we are here to help you with that. I love teaching. I love educating people. I used to be a professor back in the day, so part of all of that professoring, if you will, comes out and it comes across. And I love helping people get it. And so that's why I coach. That's why, I've fallen into the passion areas that I've fallen into. So I really, really, truly appreciate that. And then Zed, this is awesome. Thank you so much. I appreciate you. Thank you so much. Um, yes, I am a product of who I am, and I am not Oprah. That's right. That's right. That's right. This has been great. Thank you. Um, I'll stay connected. Good deal. I appreciate that. Thank you for doing that. Let me get out of there, Swan. All right, good people. It's Saturday afternoon. Go enjoy yourself. Um, have some fun. Go do some stuff. And this is the applause. This is for you for staying and listening to everything I had to say. That's not for me. That is for you. All right. Have a great day, and God bless.